Hello Wildlanders, SK here. In this video, we're actually doing a interview with DylanbPerry, who is the mod author to Wildlander. Unfortunately, the first couple minutes were lost and did not record properly. However, he mostly just said hello, and he did let us know something exciting, which is he is going to be able to showcase more actual content for the future update 1.2. As you may not have seen a whole lot recently, we should see that going forward a bit more, which is super exciting. I hope you enjoy the video. If you do, leave a like and consider subscribing. Stay safe, Wildlanders.
For us, thankfully, Iron Dusk, his style, okay, if you look at spell research, if you look at wounds, if you look at train and study, his sort of ethos on balance, I think, naturally aligns with Requiem a lot more. I almost was going to say that he plays Requiem, and I don't want to say that outright because I can't remember if it's true or not. I'm pretty sure he has played it at the very least. But by default, we have a lot less work to do in the balance sphere just because of the way that he sort of designs things from the outset. If it's more a general question on, let's just say that we do encounter some sort of balance issue, and what do we do with it? It really depends on what is happening, right? I think we spoke about this a little bit in the last one, but a lot of balancing stuff is not so bad. It'll be something, like even with Winter Sun, let's say, right? Just using, I don't know, I'm making this up. I have no idea if this is real. But let's say you get a power from, who's your favorite Aedra? You personally.
For me, probably Akatosh.
Okay, so you get Akatosh, Time Lord. You get I don't know what that might even be close to what it does, but my first thought would be you get, okay, if you're in good standing or you have above 50 favor with Akatosh, you get a 50% reduction in shout cooldowns, and with every additional point in favor, that increases up to no cap. It can just go up to 100. This is obviously fucked for Requiem. Dragon shouts, by the time you even get them, you already have to be pretty yoked as a character. So Dragon shouts and Requiem are super, super powerful. So you can see how a 50% cooldown time reduction would already be nuts. Just a simple example. Just turn it down. Put it, I don't know, 3%. You know what I mean? Go down to granular 3.5% per favor point or whatever. You have to play with it. It takes play testing, and you're not usually going to get that right on the first pass. You kind of need play testing data, which we can gather some of, but we really rely on the larger player base to get us like super dialed in. But that kind of stuff's easy. You just play with the numbers. Tougher things are ones where, I want to say that most balance concerns tend to fit that mold, right? It's a number that you can adjust one way or another, or a series of them. Sometimes, I guess, you do come across like a balance issue that feels a little bit more fundamental. A good example of something like that, this is another thing that I'm just making up off the top of my head. Let's say that you have this has to be the case even too with religion, with RK, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's with other, religion mods. RK, who hates undead, let's say, or is it, does Meridia hate vampires the most? I know RK is not a fan, but isn't Meridia the big anti-vampire Daedra?
Honestly, I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure. I think that's her whole fucking thing, is she's like, ew, vampires, whatever. So presumably killing vampires is something, let's just say that it is for the sake of conversation. Let's say, oops, to gain favor with Vermina, it's very heavily based on how many vampires you've killed. You can see where this is going to be a big problem in Requiem, where vampires are high-level enemies, and, a religion mod might have assumed vanilla balance, where vampires are just one additional flavor of thing you can fight. That's a lot tougher. Off the top of my head, yeah, I would even have to sit and think about how the simple answers would be, well, you could make something else a primary driver of the favor mechanics for Meridia, sorry. Was I saying Meridia or Vermina before? I don't remember.
You were originally talking about Meridia, and then you said Vermina a little bit later.
Okay, Meridia is who I meant. You know, it's divine. You could shift the emphasis onto whatever other mechanics exist. You could create new mechanics that, you know, I don't know, dig into their lore and say, what else might they be kind of into? You could alternatively lean into the idea that, let's just say Meridia only cares about vampires. She doesn't really fuck with anything else. You could leave it like that, and then you could adjust the power curve of her boons and her whatever to kind of more closely reflect the reality that only sort of generally high level characters are going to be gaining favor with her, right? You could even see a bit of fun in that if you have one deity who sort of is almost like late game focused or requires a character to be at least a little bit beefier. That could create some fun opportunities for people who want to try and speed run, you know, vampire killing, because like vampires have particularities to them that maybe you could kind of build a character towards that. Like, nothing's hard and fast, but you do have to, I think, in a situation like that, get pretty loosey-goosey with how you might solve the problem. And that's the most fun thing, right? Like, that's, I think, what, like you and I were talking about before we started recording. So the problem solving is the fun part. You just also, of course, have to find whatever the function of how much time does it take versus how much value does it generate, right?
No, that makes sense. I think kind of touching on, again, we'll use Meridia. Every time I hear her name, I just think of Meridia's beacon, being shouted into my eardrum.
New hand has touched the beacon. It's like the gentle version.
That is an incredibly gentle version. And
someone should do just like a straight up like screamo remix of that and just lean harder into just being the most obnoxious, like, ear-splitting thing.
I partially hope no one does, and partially hope someone does, out of,
Sure.
like, cat-like curiosity.
Yes, of two minds.
But,
sorry, you were saying.
No, you're good. Touching on Meridia, so, like, building with the foundation that her primary focus would be vampires, which, again, are higher-level enemies. Skill issue. I think something that would be neat is, and you've kind of talked about this just in general, is having sort of different ways to worship a deity outside of, like, activities, you know, like wearing the amulet, gear, studying about them, etc. Maybe those wouldn't be nearly as pivotal, right? Because for her, the big thing is killing vampires or something to that extent.
Right.
But they have small returns that are, like, interesting
like
and dip your toe in it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's something that thankfully, like, I've said this before, I think I said this in the last time too, in the last interview. One of the things that I was so excited about with religion in particular is how reactive it is when it comes to that kind of stuff. Iron Dusk just really dug in there, really thought about all the different just ways that you could kind of, you know, show your favor in this way. Just the little touches, everything from, like, reading books about them to, wearing their amulet to hanging out in places that they sort of would like. That's kind of the baseline that exists for every deity, right? Is those things. Those are, I guess, maybe not entirely passive, but I would say comparatively passive versus something like, you know, I'm going out and catching butterflies, or I'm killing an enemy of this type, or whatever it is. Those are good too. Yeah, I mean, I think that stuff like that should exist. I think as the baseline for all of them, you kind of, you know, it's all the little baby steps in which we make godly acts or ungodly acts every day. So I like having that stuff around. And it is fun to try and think of ways that might sort of, you know, you could add. I think that's going to be both one of the biggest challenges and also one of the big sources of fun as we fill out the deities that remain.
I feel like one of the most fun things, and I don't feel this way right now, but I feel like I will when the religion mod gets added, is like you're doing something And then because you did something that you didn't really think through, right? It could be small or big. You're like, why can't I do this anymore? And you go, oh, because my god doesn't like that I'm doing X, right? Like, oh, my god doesn't like that I'm working with the vampire. An example, I guess a bad example, in the current version is just the Requiem basis that, oh, I killed somebody like 6 years ago. Oh, none of the gods will let me worship them anymore.
No shrine blessings for me.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
But when it kind of is like one of those things where like it clicks because you're like, oh no, I didn't even think about it, but I shouldn't have done that. It like pulls you in a little bit more, you know?
Yeah, that is a really tricky thing to balance because on the one hand, so this is actually going to be a big challenge with religion. I think big is maybe intense. It's going to be a challenge. This is one of the things that Iron Dusk was sure he like made a point to tell me that this area of the mod would definitely need some sort of spit and polish and some expansion. And that's player feedback, right? I think in the same way that Requiem can really, I think one of the biggest sources of frustration that we hear about, and this is, you mentioned it already, it's not news to you or anyone else who creates content in the Wildlander space or Requiem space. People just suddenly won't have access to any sort of blessings anymore. They won't understand why. There is, I agree with you, a degree of fun in sort of going, oh no, like realizing, I guess, that you had sort of betrayed a deity in some way and kind of figuring it out. I imagine most players don't. I imagine they just find out by asking in the community or going on our wiki or using one of the Requiem resources. And to be honest, I think the more common sort of outcome or feeling from players is frustration from the lack of feedback. I guess in an ideal scenario, you might be able to maintain some sense of balance between, not revealing too much about what's going on and revealing enough to where people don't get frustrated when something like this happens. That's kind of where I'm aiming for religion as it stands right now, right? The feedback that you get from Iron Dusk's religion is pretty subtle. You will, like, summarily, this is actually one of the areas in which Iron Dusk had the most brilliant ideas, and you can still see some of the actual implementation in the mod. A lot of it is kind of in the notes and never made it in, but he really seemed to be very engaged by this idea of how do you provide player feedback, right, without sort of pulling the curtain back too much, right? And so you get, like, right now, when you're in an area that the divines like, there's like a divine likes, right? There's a subtle sort of wind sound that played. When he was messaging me, he was like, yeah, I don't think anyone's ever going to notice that. And I had noticed it because I, would teleport myself to the Temple of the Divines all the time for testing. And I was like, what the fuck is that? Like, was that always there? And it wasn't. And it's a sound that plays when you have this mod installed. I was like, oh shit. I didn't know what it meant though. I knew it had something to do with religion. I didn't understand exactly what it was trying to tell me, which is that, you are in a location, again, that will receive essentially a favor bonus if you pray or do sort of religious, pious things here. It didn't say which of the deities it applied to. I still don't know, to be honest with you, because it's literally the Temple of the Divines. It's, I guess except for Talos, it's the other 8. So I still don't have an answer for that. The other system that he had sort of put in place partially was this like glimpses and visions system where you can ask for like a vision or a glimpse, or essentially ask your god for guidance, right? Which can make it more likely for you to get a vision. Sometimes you just have them, depending on the stuff that you've been doing. You'll just kind of organically go to sleep one night, and because of, just the pious acts that you've been up to, you'll get a vision, right? And it'll pertain to some form of deity, and it's supposed to offer some sort of guidance as to what sort of things the deity likes, right? you can see, one, how fucking cool this is, at least if you're me. I think it's an incredible
that
idea.
Sounds fantastic.
And this is, I'm telling you, man, this is in there already, in, not in a complete sense, but in terms of the system itself, that's complete. It's in filling out the content and filling out the deities that don't have it yet, or don't have the visions and stuff. The skeleton is there, and the ones that do have the visions and whatever, they work just fine. From a player feedback standpoint, there's probably a little bit more I think that you could do just to let people know kind of which deity it is, or kind of what they're trying to tell you. Because there can also be some pretty significant consequences if you try to, most players I think are going to go in, they're going to see the option to ask for guidance. They're going to be like, why wouldn't I want guidance? They'll ask for it all the time. For the Aedra, that's no problem. For the Daedra, you can actually piss them off if you do that. If you annoy them too much, they will fuck with you, like in ways that are funny to them, maybe not so much to you. Again, yeah, it's so cool, but there's not really a whole lot that's there that's telling you that, right? So this player tutorialization, player feedback, when you have if you look at the rest of Iron Dusk's works, I think and really Requiem is like this, Wildlander's like this. I think when you have people who are interested in like systems design first and foremost, and not even just systems designers, but we'll just say designers, right? For a lot of designers, mechanics are far more interesting than documentation. They're far more interesting than tutorialization. So you end up with a lot of really cool stuff in place that isn't necessarily telegraphed in like a reasonable or complete way. So I can't remember what the original question was, but this is an area that I probably will require the most focus. Probably if you look at kind of where the mod is in terms of its features and, quote unquote, how far along it is in what you might call its development cycle, I would say it's just, the skeleton of the mod is completely in place. All of the systems work exactly as they should. What is missing is just the, handful of deities that he didn't get around to. And then what's missing is a degree of additional feedback or tutorialization that I think kind of will help a lot, because these are complex mechanics. Again, it's like if you look at spell research, if you look at training study, I guess a little bit less, but spell research is the prime example where you have such a deep and interesting system and series of interacting mechanics that is almost holistically not tutorialized at all, that leaves people who just encounter it in game going, what is this? What are these?
The Dark Souls approach.
Oh yeah, well, and even there, I think there is a degree of tutorialization that's on the mod page, like on the description, and there's documentation there, because the mod was made in a time where mod authors had the reasonable expectation that if someone was interacting with their mod in game, it's because the user had found that mod themselves and installed it themselves. That is obviously not the case anymore for mod packs and Wabbajack and this kind of stuff. You don't necessarily have, pack authors try to direct people towards, the pages sometimes, or we obviously, we try really, really hard with Lizzie and 3D's wiki, but the wiki, that, I'm proud and sad to say that there's really not anything like it, at least that I know of in the mod pack sphere, right? Where there's this much emphasis on documentation and tutorialization. So it's an interesting challenge. It's interesting to see how this sort of player confusion has resulted under this new sort of pipeline that exists, right? Where people aren't necessarily searching for spell crafting mod and discovering spell research themselves and sort of acclimating themselves. Even, people don't always read even at that point, but they certainly don't read if they're not the ones who sought the mod out themselves, if that makes sense.
Yes. I commend the modding staff, the support staff, because the amount of times I look at the Discord because I'm bored and pretending to work, and I see someone ask a question that's on the first page of the wiki, and they're like, well, I didn't read the wiki, and I'm like,
oh yeah,
that is why you don't know the answer.
Yep. It's there. We long ago learned, and anyone who creates any sort of user-facing anything knows this. And that's not just software development, that's any sort of game, anything that you know, you have any board game designer, like whatever. People don't read. I don't necessarily blame them. There's a million different reasons why people don't. It can be really frustrating sometimes when you put, like, sometimes you'll just put like the big notice in front of people that says, do this or don't do this or whatever it is, and they'll somehow manage to get past that as well. So you're just like, oh my gosh. Or like people don't even necessarily know that the wiki exists. That you could look at as sort of a byproduct of like, okay, this is where you really have to start kind of from a project design standpoint, you start tracing things back. Like every time you see someone who's like, oh, I had no idea the wiki exists, or I missed, when you say it's like back when the instructions were super manual, you know, if you start to see users who are all kind of consistently having the same problem, it's like, yeah, okay, probably we had this somewhere and they should have read, but they're clearly not. So where in the pipeline can we sort of either make it more obvious, or is there some way that we can just sort of circumvent this problem entirely? It's another interesting problem to solve, is tutorialization of just like simple things like that, like tutorialization of where to find tutorials. Just choked on my own spit.
You heard it first. Dylan's dying on my video.
I'm dying from tutorialization, the lack thereof.
It's kind of like roadmap to the roadmap. You got tutorial to the tutorial.
Yeah, exactly. It's something when a lot of, I think, designers and developers sort of don't even think about documentation or tutorialization to begin with. Talking about getting a roadmap to the roadmap, they're like, they don't even want to make the roadmap to begin. I didn't want to make the roadmap. It was just like, okay, well, we should have one because we need one. We need one internally, and we need one, or arguably should have one for users to see what we're working on. Like a lot of what I've sort of kind of had on the back burner now because I've not been able to work on it with this stuff. But I've been focusing on building out the roadmap, so it's like has like concrete sort of like times and quarter release dates, and I've been working on my own sort of like personal calendar that shows what I'm working on like every single day, not just, you know, Wildlander stuff, but so people can see, you know, it's nice to be able to see when something that you care about has been like seen and addressed. Or, you know what's a great example of this actually is do you happen to know of a website called Artings?
I do not.
Okay, so Artings is, I feel like it's pretty niche still, but there's like a subset of people, if you're a big nerd about displays, the way that I am, we're talking TVs, monitors. They cover other stuff too, like, I don't know, headphones and other just technological peripheral rather. But Artings is my personal favorite resource for TV reviews, any sort of display, right? Like if you're interested in this sort of sub genre of product, their methodologies and just their kind of testing processes and just the style of, I guess you'd call it like tech journalism or sort of reviewing that they do is something that I very much like. Like if someone likes, you know, your MKBHDs or your Linus Tech Tips kind of stuff, this is in the same vein. The reason I mention them is that they have a, like whenever there's a new kind of bit of tech, like a new monitor or whatever that comes out, I can go on Artings and I can click their, like they have the big link at the top that says, you know, this many reviews in progress, right? So I click that. I can see a big just list essentially of all the stuff that they are currently looking at, right? You can sort it by category. So we're talking, you know, like TVs, monitors, computer parts, whatever. Within that, you can sort it by like, okay, this is, they have it on the docket to review. They have it in the lab. They're doing the long-term testing. They have done all the testing and now they're writing the review. And now the review's made it into early access and now the review is out for everybody, right? Like you can see exactly where each one of these things is in the pipeline, which I just think, and they update it as they go too. It's like to me, it's a sort of I mean, I don't know if I have the authority to call something a masterclass in, I don't even know, transparency when I haven't seen, I don't know if there's other websites that do this sort of thing better or worse, but it's hard for me to imagine someone doing it that much better. I just think it's great. I think it's such a cool way to sort of, I don't know, engage with people and sort of just let them know what's going on. I think it's a bummer to, and this is where anyone who likes Wildlander, I think historically has really had to suffer. But it's just kind of a bummer to be in this position as someone who is a fan of the project, who likes what's happening, who is passionate about what's coming next, to just where you're stuck just not really knowing anything at all, right? It's maybe a natural sort of how it has to be for a project of this sort, where, you know, it's a fan hobby project. We don't really make, not no money, but we don't make nearly enough money to do it, you know, at a full-time rate. So it just, maybe it's not in the cards, but to whatever degree we can, I like to do that stuff, and that's why I try to focus on it at least a little bit.
Yeah, and I think, you know, even for me, I wasn't someone who was like, oh, I really want a roadmap. But then I saw your roadmap, and again, I know it's still a work in progress, but I was like, this is helpful. I go, okay, these are what, you know, the team is just looking at, right? I don't know specifically what they're seeing, but I know they're looking in this direction, which is helpful. And I'm someone who's pretty, like, linked in, you know, for the most part with Wildlander, because I spend way too much time in the Discord and all that stuff, but I found it useful, so I imagine just, you know, people who are even more casual will find it useful. So
sure, I'm glad to hear that. I think it's, if I'm honest, it's still it'll be a lot more useful once stuff is pinned down and there's, like, I think that what really, it's like the most important part of a roadmap is due dates, right? The most important part of planning anything is due dates. So with the roadmap in its current state, where most stuff doesn't have a due date, I think that the real utility is limited by that, and, you know, we're working on really sort of putting them on there where we can and getting it organized. But I'm glad, hopefully it's some utility at this point still, just to even see sort of, you know, what we like, what we maybe think is cool, but we don't think it's a great fit for what we're doing, or this would be a great fit, but it, you know, has these blockers, or just whatever you can glean from looking at the mod suggestion evaluations. But hopefully it'll have even more utility in the near future.
yeah, I imagine as you fill it out, it'll just continue to add value, and then, like you said, once there's more due dates, but also things like get done and checked off the box, it'll be really cool.
Yes, that is a very important component too.
Using that as, like, a segue, Gumshoe Bill, I love his username. He asked,
He's a detective.
He is a detective. How far along do you think Wildlander will be in 2 years' time?
Oh, I mean, it's a good question. My honest answer is that, well, it depends on what you mean by far along. What we're trying to do now, starting with Q3, is to have a quarterly release schedule, right? The Q3 release is slotted to be, you know, religion and jobs, which is bigger than what we plan for these quarterly releases to generally kind of fit. So if you use that as, and the reason this one's so much bigger is that it's, you know, we've had a lot more time to work on it in a sense, and also it kind of spanned that period of time when I was really sort of figuring out my own shit, basically, with, you know, what I was doing for work. In a sense, that's still happening. I'm kind of having to reimagine a little bit of my behind the scenes work schedule, but either way, it's a lot more set in stone now, so we can make more sort of reliable predictions. If you use this upcoming release as a metric, that's Q3. That means what? So we got Q4 2023. And then let's just say if it's 2 years from the Q3 release, that's what? 8 releases then, right?
Yeah.
All of which, again, would be smaller. Let's even say 50% of the size of this upcoming one. Maybe 60 if we're generous, maybe a little bit less, you never know. What can be done in that time? There's a whole lot of different ways it could go. It really sort of depends on what we prioritize. Really still what I've been thinking about a lot over the course of the development of this release for this upcoming Q3 is just kind of, I'm at like an interesting crossroads, right? Where I'm really sort of it's what I like to call like the adulting, like the maturation of a hobbyist developer, right? Where I feel like I'm finally running up against this wall and accepting that it's there of what I would love to do versus what is possible with the time that I have and that we have. I'm really trying to focus in these upcoming releases on stuff that hits that intersection I mentioned earlier of, this adds a lot of value to the experience versus, doesn't require as much time, or like whatever, if you have a function of those two, values, what is the absolute highest scoring? That is actually one of the big sort of things I've been working on behind the scenes for the roadmap, actually, is trying to just for myself really, but I suppose someone, it maybe benefits users to see it too. Just, how much value does something add and how difficult is it to do? Where we are now, there are a lot of mod suggestions. There's a lot of sort of pre-made content, you might say, and that's not just, quests or content. That includes mechanics, it includes fixes, immersion touches. As of right now, I would say the next couple of updates will focus still pretty heavily on what mods can we add that are basically all there, that really kind of add to the experience and don't really require that much from us in terms of, just pure proprietary work. The biggest candidate for proprietary stuff that I could think of, if you even count this, would be the controls and HUD business that you guys have heard me talk about like a million times. That's what I was working on before this, SK, that we were joking about before we went live. Just because I think that it's a huge accessibility get. I think that being able to, for one, have it on Steam Deck, like, cool boy, I don't know, but just having like a nice, just further making it easier to play. It's like for veterans, it's probably not as exciting. I think it'll be exciting in some sense that it'll still make it easier for them to play like the game flow. I think that'll be fun. It's almost like, what's a good example? Can you think of a game where they had an update where before the update, it was just still pretty like complex and cumbersome and sort of inaccessible, and then I'm trying to think of like a complex game where maybe RimWorld has had updates like this. I'm trying to think of very complex games that have had updates of this sort. Maybe, I don't know, RuneScape 2, whatever the hell. That would be like the next proprietary thing. Let's call that, I don't know, roughly. That's what I would look at for like Q1, maybe at the earliest of next year, that is. From there, Vampirism really there's a lot of different directions you could take it, and I can't pin down release dates or times until we really know that we'd be able to do it. I think I'll be looking at the community too and being like, hey, really, what do you guys want the most? That's what we did with Religion. It feels like forever ago now, but that's been a fun sort of community interaction / Patreon incentive, right? Was like, hey, of these different things, what do you guys want the most, right? So I'll still be doing that. But yeah, I would say that it's hard to say or like provide a point of reference when you guys don't have this current release in your hands yet, but most quarterly releases we'll estimate are about half the size of this one, and we'll get 8 of those from this point out, if everything goes according to plan.
So this one, like 1.2, kind of feels like I think it started off as like an all-you-can-eat buffet, and then you guys kind of condensed it to a more reasonable, like a little bit more of like a full course meal. And it sounds like in future updates, you're looking for just a standard meal. Not necessarily bite-sized, but enough that like, hey, I'm going to be full, but I'm not going to have a whole cake that I should have saved room for.
That is probably the most perfect analogy I've ever heard someone generate. This update 1.2 or whatever we're calling it, I'm going to move to like a releases. Lizzie's been teaching me the sort of release monikers that her company uses, so I'm going to be looking into using that, but we'll call it 1.2 for now. 1.2, yeah, is I went to Olive Garden and I got the unlimited pasta deal, and the first plate of pasta that they gave me was already massive, and I ate the whole thing, and then they basically gave me like at least a whole half of it to take home, which is like way more pasta than anyone should be eating, but like, hey, whatever, I'll take it home and I'll eat it. That's this one.
Don't forget the gnocchi soup too.
Oh, dude, of course. What's that soup that they have? My grandma loves Olive Garden. I swear to God, I've been there so many times since I was a kid. The zuppa Toscana. It's benissimo. Delicious. The Authentico Experience Italiano, I'm sure. The quarterly updates, there are a lot more focused. They're a lot leaner. They're a full meal for sure. They're like a standard meal. Hopefully that feels like it's, prepared just like by a 3-star Michelin chef, where it's maybe the scope of it is smaller, but what you're getting is, we try, especially now with the long history of Ultimate Skyrim's kind of wonky releases behind us. We really do try to polish what we release, no matter the size, but obviously if something's a little bit smaller and a little bit leaner, it's easier to do that. So I don't know. Again, just really trying to prioritize what makes the biggest impact with the least time requirement to create that space for us to polish everything up and release these on a consistent, expectable cadence. So yeah, 2 years out, it's tough to say. Again, it's tougher to say when you don't have 1.2 in your hands and you can kind of get a sense of how big that is to use as a point of reference, but hopefully that provides some sense of guidance.
No, I think that was a pretty good way to answer it. I understand the question, because I myself am like, ooh, what can I expect in 2 years? What can I expect before 2.0, right? I'm definitely excited for the future, seeing what you guys have already been able to do. But with that being said, I think it does depend, like you said, a little bit on new mods are made all the time. So potentially you could have a mod that solves a quote-unquote problem that you were looking at in the future, and you're like, wow, I don't have to spend 10 times the amount of hours building out this whole system. I just gotta build out, round out the edges for a system already in place. So that's definitely...
That also, by the way, happens all the time. It happened... The most recent example I can think of was... what's the acronym? The acronym is COX. Can I say that?
Demonetized.
It's YouTube, baby. Yeah, demonetized. What is it? It's Parapet's constructible object crafting keyword system, I want to say, where essentially Parapets came up with a whole new way to categorize items within the crafting menu. I don't know if you've seen this. It's actually kind of revolutionary for a couple different reasons that I won't bother to get into, but it's the perfect example of something that was like, oh my God, we had plans that, we were gonna have to use these super cumbersome workarounds to get them done. And now it's just it's so much simpler to do the stuff that we wanted to do. Anyway,
Constructible object custom keyword system.
That custom keyword system, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And it is legendary. Also, I still can't, just speaking of Parapets, I mentioned this on stream before, but that controls update that I mentioned, now I have sometimes it's easier when I'm like, okay, I know something's being built right now that's going to affect this in this way and kind of cut down on time. But if Parapets ends up finishing what I've spoken about with them that they've been working on, oh man, it's going to make that controls update so much easier to do, and we'd just be able to do it so much faster than it would have taken otherwise. So we'll see. Yeah, sorry, I interrupted you.
No worries. Yeah, I hope you built it out too. I love that you guys work on stuff, but the less you have to work on means the more you can work on. So it's just a net positive. Circling back a little bit, and this kind of ties into something you said, and I have some thoughts, but I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are, if they've changed at all. KBZ, also a funny name.
Hey! KBZ is I'm well familiar. This is an old head.
Oh, okay. Well, new head to me, but old head for you. Will patron/super patron voting be reevaluated and return for the future?
Yes, so that's what I was referring to with the planning of the different quarterly releases. I plan on doing one for every one that we're gonna do. It's, of course, you have to hit that through section of stuff that we know kind of needs to be in there, right? Which most of the stuff that we know needs to be in there generally aligns with what people would want. We're talking things like bug fixes or like bang for your buck things that like no one would balk at, but it does require some degree of development time. You also want to get people excited about having a vote and just generally excited about the updates. Like getting to take the pulse of the community on what people feel like, should be prioritized next, right? Like we have our opinions. It's always good to get just the lay of the land and figure out what people might think. The patron and super patron voting, what I might do to expand it is that with the last one, it was only patrons, right, who got to vote?
Correct.
And what I would like to do maybe in the future is expand it so that everybody in the fan, because I mean, as of now, I'm hoping this, changes with the trailer that's coming out and whatever. Like you always want more players in the player base, but I'm hoping that with the new trailer and with, an actual consistent sort of release cadence, however big the updates are, we'll bring in more players. The player base will, continue to grow, become even healthier. I want those players to be able to, offer their suggestion, their vote on what comes next as well. So I was thinking about expanding it to be like, and these are just rough numbers I'm throwing out there, maybe every person gets 1 vote, patrons get 2, a super patron gets 3 or 4 or something like that. Because, proportionately, there's a lot less super patrons significantly. There's less patrons than there are general users, so I feel like it would be okay. We'll see. Or, you can even go granular. You can go decimals, give patrons 2 and give super patrons 2.5 or whatever it is. But short answer, yes. And that was a lot of fun. The 40 years ago, it feels like we got to do it last. So I'm excited to bring that back.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like, and it depends, obviously you'll see more as you guys go forward, but I was thinking like you could probably even get away with like 3 or 4 times for normal patrons and then like 5 or 6 for super patrons. I could be wrong, but I imagine if you were to give the option for just everyone to vote, that there would be so many votes that it would matter, but it wouldn't be like this big weight balance for those
sure,
who are... But obviously, again, you never know, only time will tell. But I think that would be a cool idea, like you said, to just include everybody, and then not only do you get a bigger pulse, but like you said, it kind of breeds excitement. Everyone gets to kind of give their input, and
that's totally...
That is super cool.
What if I asked you right now, SK? I mean, I'm not giving you a series of options, so I guess any option is available. What would your dream next poll winner be?
Oh man.
That's also a little bit unfair because I'm asking you to sort of define the scope of an update with that question, I guess. But I'm not gonna. It doesn't need to be. I don't know, like hyper thought out or anything. Just I'm always curious. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and I'm trying to think, what way do I want to bias the people watching this video so that they vote that way next time?
Them psychologically.
No,
You can think about it. You don't have to answer now. You can think about it over the course of, I got, what is it, 4 o'clock right now. I have an additional 20 minutes that I can do. So you can think about it, hit me back with it. Or, I mean, it's your video. You can edit it in after the fact and then use, what's it called, 11 Labs AI to be like, have me go, yes, that will be the next poll winner.
Oh, like the Wildlanders canceled thing? That's I don't know.
Yeah.
That's my least that's my most disliked video of all time, by the way. No joke.
Is that true?
Yes.
What do people like anti-clickbait brigade kind of thing?
Yeah, it has like 83% approval rate, which is not bad.
That's still pretty good. But yeah, that's not. I think that's worth it. That's the, what do they say? Any publicity is good publicity. I thought it was funny for whatever it's worth.
And no one in the comments was like nasty or anything, so I imagine it was fun. I think if I could pick, because I think your updates are gonna be like you said, more lean. I want a little bit of a balance update. You and I already talked about this a little bit, but I think balancing the middle of the game and the end of the game a little bit more. Things such as adding new weapons and gear so that you're not always going back to the same legendary items. I think that would be really nice. Dawnbreaker is great, but the fact that I think it and only 2 other options are really like at the top there, I would like a little bit more. Killers. The fact that the Necromancer's Amulet is, I feel like, in a league of its own.
That thing is ridiculous. Yeah, the Necromancer's Amulet is it's oh boy.
So I think I really just think a balance update would be super helpful in terms of gameplay. Now, if I just wanted to go buck wild and go, what is my dream? I would truly love a DylanbPerry certified druid edition. I would love to play. I'm such a big druid nerd. Every time I play D&D, I find ways to just make my DM hate me with being a druid. I would love to transform into different creatures.
Druids are crazy OP.
It's so good.
Well, early druids, but that's another discussion. You know far better than I do, I'm sure.
Oh, late druids too.
Extra fucking cool. That is definitely true. Well, thank you for answering. I'll think about it. I'll see what it really is tough because let's say you go, okay, so this is going to be the druid update. That is, sometimes maybe you can't avoid this, but there are I'm going through the updates, and when I try to package them, and I guess you always can just add some stuff that anyone would like, right? Maybe this is how you offset it. But it's if I know for anyone who wants to play as a druid or who is open to the idea, whatever, they're gonna fucking love this. If you're not as interested in playing a druid, it's here's an update that you skip entirely, right? Maybe that's just how it goes. Because frankly, secretly, I would like to also play it as a druid, so I'm just preemptively thinking about. Sure.
I think the way you do
it a good answer.
Is kind of a couple things. I don't think you start off with a druid update. I think that I don't think that should be the next step. Even if you gave me what I wanted, I would not have it that way. I think, and again, I know so little, so my opinion is almost invalid, but I'm gonna give it anyways. I would do sprinkle effects, so fix a couple things, or change a couple things, or add a couple things over the next 3 or 4 updates that make playing a druid just in general, yes, maybe you can't shape change and all that, but make it more interesting and more fun. So for instance, foraging could be a great
here and there. Yeah, foraging gets a little bit of an upgrade, just a little,
being able to construct different huts and whatever. I don't know if they have that or not. Again, I know that some mods never made it out of old Skyrim, but just little things that would make playing a druid bare bones without a massive addition more doable. And then once you've kind of built out some of the other stuff, you guys have a feel for your quarterly, then I think that's a challenge you take on. If I were you looking at it now, that looks like a pain in the butt to try and do right out the gate, if that makes sense.
I mean, I think that that is a very tempered, reasonable approach. The approach that you just described is something I think Lizzie would agree with wholeheartedly. I'm usually the one who wants to go off the rails and well, like, oh, well, if we're adding this, then if we're adding druid huts, then we gotta add an entire decoration system. Stop. But that would be the way to do it, and it is generally the approach we're trying to take now too. Just even with this one, right? Like, there's jobs, there's religion, there's a couple balance fixes. Like you said, you would like a balance update, right? Maybe this kind of fits this exact sort of structure that you're talking about, but we have a couple relative, again, easy to implement, high impact, no time requirement, little time requirement, like balance fixes that will be in there, like what's the big one? Regeneration is getting a nerf, right? Because they're, trolls and whatnot. Jury's still out on sneak buffing, adjusting. That's kind of one that I'd like to do. I'm not sure we'll have the time, but just sprinkling in these little sort of fixes that maybe, like, it's really easy to sort of think of things monolithically, where we got to have all these features in there or it's not worth doing at all, and it's really just not that way. I call that another maturation of developer. There are so many players who I think are positive. Look, just using your example of the huts, right? There are just coincidentally, specifically, some mods out there that allow you to build and place like a fairly druidic hut, or just sort of little outdoorsy, like, mini homes, I guess you might say. There's a definite temptation when you're doing something like that to be like, okay, by adding, like a custom placeable mini house for the wilderness before we add like the bona fide kind of place anywhere, build things anywhere mechanics, right? Like, are we getting ahead of ourselves or whatever? Honestly, no. I think it's probably the more reasonable way to do it. I think you're talking about, do you need that entire quote-unquote framework in place before you add a feature like this? No. Will you learn a lot of stuff, even just from adding this little mini version of that feature that you can then use when you're implementing the larger framework? Yes. I promise I'll stop asking questions and answering them now.
Diverting questions.
I realize that I've been doing this. I'm like, ew. There's just, think about how many different players benefit from something as simple as that, who would just enjoy it. And it's not even just necessarily druids, right? But even just people who are like, my character is a hermit and doesn't like interacting with people, and now I can make a little house that's out in the woods. Or just like someone who, I don't know, builds one on like the edge of town. It's like, this is my little base, or like whatever it is. It is a good example of how you can sort of hit a lot of the value without putting in nearly as much effort.
Yeah.
So keep that strategy in mind.
Well, something that you guys benefit from, whether you know it or not, and I imagine you do, but even if you don't know it, is you're not building this, at least it isn't marketed, and I don't look at it as this like ultra hardcore, etc. mod pack. You're building, a role play based mod pack, an immersive mod
life
pack,
sim,
and something that, yeah, it can suck, but I also think the inverse is true. It can rock in some instances, is that there is something nice and unique about having boundaries and having to work within them. So as a player, even if I don't get everything I want, right? I don't get my cake and I get to eat it too, which is the worst analogy I've ever heard. I could talk about how that makes no sense.
You know how it makes sense? I'm going to blow your mind right now.
Okay.
It's supposed to be the other way around. You can't eat your cake and have it too.
But what does that mean? You say it like that.
It means that you can't eat, because you want to eat your cake and you want to have it too. Maybe I won't end up blowing your mind if you've already considered this. But the idea is that you can't, it's a physical object, at least this is how I understand it. It's a physical object that you can either have still or you can eat it. But once you've eaten it, it's gone, right?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So like you can have, right. Okay, that makes sense.
It's generally well, yeah, I mean, it is a weird expression for sure, but I swear that like, even if you just swap them around, I feel like that was one of those weird sort of like English to American English mistakes, was when you say it's like, I want to have my cake and eat it too. It's very strange because you go, well, why wouldn't I want to eat it? I have a cake. But you say, eat my cake and have it too. It's like, oh, well, then the action that got rid of the cake precedes the circumstance in which I still want the cake I've eaten. Anyway.
I see what you're saying. Here's why, for me, yeah, I'll quickly open this can of worms and then continue. But with the having the cake and eat it too, I look at it and I go, I don't want to have the cake. I want to eat the cake. That is why I have the cake in the first place.
Of eating it.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I feel like it's still kind of stupid then, too. It's like, what good is a cake that you have no intent of eating?
Exactly. I understand that it can be an aesthetic, but then I don't want to eat it. So I don't know. Usually aesthetic cakes aren't good anyways, as good as the ugly cakes that really do the job.
Sure, r/fondant hate.
But having the boundary that, you know, like you mentioned, maybe you just have a hut and then the next update you add some spells, and then the next update you fix foraging, and then, you know, etc. Sure. These boundaries grow a little bit, but also what you can do within them. I mean, I've seen some of the stuff the Wildlander community. Yes, like some of the stuff that community does with stuff that just like, for me, I'm like, how did you even think of that? Like some guy, I think it was Barry Jones, if I remember correctly. And I'm sure that I'm just a noob, but he's like, yeah, if you hold a specific weapon and you're over encumbered, you just attack a certain way and you move so much faster. And that's how he got around for like 20 minutes of travel. And I'm like,
wonderful.
You are hilarious. Like, this is, I learned so much because, again, boundaries make, you know, to some extent, they make you creative. So
sure.
I do know you got to get going soon. So I'm going to jump into the next question. It is the last fan question, something you've somewhat touched on, but maybe you have a little bit more to add with it being as concise. It's kind of like a double layer question. With many things from Skyrim just kind of naturally buggy, where for you guys does further polish fit in as a priority? What things are fixable versus problems that, you know, we just have to live with? And then the second part of that question is, after 1.2, I would like to see a QA pass before the addition of further mods. Does Dylan wish to do some house cleaning? If so, when and on what things in particular, if you have anything?
Yeah, so I think, I hope that the team's interest in polish has been evident for a long time. Personally, it's polish I would almost liken to accessibility when it comes to create. It's like, it's just, okay, when you have a game that feels good to play, when it doesn't break all the time, when, you know, it's not constantly breaking your immersion with some janky weird shit that's happening. And again, like, what sort of breaks immersion for one person might not be so bad for another, and vice versa, but it's very important to me. It's why, you know, I've taken so much time kind of building out the UI and just making all the, like, I guess it's hard to sort of demonstrate what polish exists underneath the hood, because it's more the absence of something that is like the core KPI for it, right? Key performance indicator. It's the absence of bugs. It's the absence of things that sort of take you out of the experience. But it is very important for me, and I think for the team, in terms of a QA pass. I would say that well, so what always makes it into the every update that we've done, especially for Wildlander, is just a bunch of just little bug fixes, right? I would almost go as to say that polish and bug fixing is like our kind of #1 priority. We tend to take that stuff more seriously than just about any other thing. That includes mod additions, it includes feature additions. I don't know if we would I wouldn't mind necessarily, I guess, doing just like a balance, or like a polish pass rather. But that's kind of every update, the way that we look at it. This update alone, like Lizzie in the past, I want to say, I don't know, 2-3 weeks, she's found a couple solutions to long-standing bugs that have just been, you know, thorns in our side since forever. Sometimes we will go through, like the what was it, the last update, the 1.1.6, I want to say, was almost entirely bug fixing. Like there were just, I'm pretty sure you can go back and look and see the ones that are done. But it's really, really important to us. It's one of the things that I see in feedback or in like the thank yous channel. I'll see people say that, you know, they feel like, yeah, it's like Skyrim is kind of a janky thing, but as far as mod packs go, this one just, you know, hits for them in that way. With all that said, there's always more to do. It is true that Skyrim is kind of a janky experience, and maybe sometimes you do have to live with certain things. To be honest, we really don't like that answer. There's some stuff like, okay, if you talk about, you know, what's like the most hard, like if the question is what are the really sort of hard and fast limitations, here's some shit that you just kind of can't get around at all.
Lights.
Well, light, yeah, well, see, like lights would be a good answer. You can't, it's like 4 dynamic lights, but even then you can prevent them from flickering by going through and making sure that lights aren't overlapping, and you know that there's not going to be circumstances in which lights are drawn dynamically, like a, you know, guard opens up a torch and or lights up a torch, and that adds the 5th light in that causes the flickering. So there's even workarounds for that.
Do you mind if I chime in for a second?
No, what's up?
So, and I'm sure you have an even better like overview of this, but something I have found with you guys is, if we see bugs and we report them, if they can be fixed 95% of the time, they are fixed. So
yes,
if we want to see
really
things,
try to do,
you know, if we really want to see things changed and improved, doing our part and going on to your bug submission, you know, link, which is very user friendly, and just submitting the bug is half the battle by itself.
Yes, I would say even more. Generally speaking, if bugs are reported, we prioritize them over everything. Obviously, there are big features, especially in, you know, this is really our first sort of big feature update where it's like, okay, we need to have these cool features, these expansions in there before we can call this, you know, before it meets the acceptance criteria. But bugs are, it's kind of our bread and butter, right? Like there are a lot of mod lists out there that are, so the other mod list creators, I know them well, we're friends, we all help each other in a million ways. The fact of the matter, and it's been a long time since I got to sit down and play, you know, some of the other mod lists that I know are just incredible. There are so many there's pretty much, I would go so far as to say that like almost all mod lists have more stuff, have more content, have more weapons, have more spells, have more quests. Most all the mod lists that I know of for Skyrim specifically they have more stuff than we do. Our kind of unique value proposition and sort of focus has always been on presentation, game feel, consistency, polish. To the best of our ability, my ability, we want this thing to feel like, you know, one, as close to vanilla in terms of polish as possible, but even better than that if we can, like even fixing vanilla bugs, like we fixed hell of vanilla bugs just here and there. Stuff does slip through the cracks. Like the biggest thing right now, I think, that is impacting the sort of game feel and polish is follower live package. Unfortunately, that mod has just, while we worked very hard to integrate it and to sort of, you know, take what worked and make it work in a way that felt seamless and sort of natural, there are just problem after problem with follower live package. You've got horses teleporting to you. You've got followers just doing the craziest shit. Some is unavoidable Skyrim jank like pathfinding and, you know, oops, Lydia's standing on top of a table and she's not supposed to be doing that. But none of, like, you can't even just blame that stuff. Like that the follower mod has just turned into this, for all the amazing sort of stuff that it does, it's been a real problem. So that's like a big priority, sort of fixing that up and getting some more sort of reasonable follower controls in there, and just generally, because followers are such a huge deal, right? But yeah, the short answer to the question is that it's a huge priority for us. if we felt like there was a ton of bugs and we just didn't have time to focus on anything else, we absolutely would do a polish pass. It really comes down to what you said, just reporting any bugs that you find. Now searching the roadmap to see if your bug has been reported or not. You know, if you report it and it's a duplicate, we'll search for it ourselves and we'll delete it. But you save us time if you go and look yourself. And also you might be able to see some other bugs that, you know, I don't know, are similar to what you've experienced, or maybe we can introduce a way to like +1 or something on the roadmap. I don't know if Airtable will let us do that. But it's a huge priority. And the second part of the question of like, what is a bug that really has no recourse? The light stuff is gnarly. It's funny. I don't know. It's the holy grail, as we've said a million times. I still hold out hope that it'll be fixable. Well, the thing about that one is that I know it's fixable. It's just that what you essentially need is someone with shader knowledge, of whom there are comparatively few in the modding community, to go through and just rewrite all the shaders so that that doesn't happen anymore. No one wants to do it because it's the most tedious fucking, oh my god, it's horrible. But even there, it's like I kind of, I don't know, like can you think of, I'm struggling to think of like the hard and fast.
Yes.
Like, but one that I, off the top of my head, additionally, that I've spoken about before is the Havoc bug fix. The one where, not, you don't really experience that in the game, but that's the one where like we can't have world spaces above a certain size because if they're too big and you move too far away from the origin point, then the physics stop working. That one's really funny, and it's also really frustrating. It's kind of creatively limiting, but even there's workarounds for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, if I remember correctly, Lizzie told me that it's not really a bug in the sense that there is no fix, but it would be that player-made chests, barrels, etc. are all linked. So I can place a chest in Whiterun, place a chest in Dawnstar, and they have all the same contents.
It's actually not hard and fast. The far and away easiest way to make player chests and whatever, like the system, the framework for it, does link them. There are a couple mods that Lizzie and I have demoed privately behind the scenes that don't have shared storage. They have their own set of cons, but it's like, well, I don't know. Can we do this? But honestly, that's a good answer because it's like no matter what way you slice it, it's very difficult to do in Skyrim. Skyrim really does not like this idea.
And part of me does want you to, well, a good chunk of me wants you to fix it for, like, immersion, and then part of me is like, yeah, but then what am I gonna do when I'm full and I just kind of want to place a chest and have all my stuff?
Sure.
So...
Though I got a short answer for you on that one, too. For whatever it's worth, non-shared storage is a big priority for me, personally. It's part of the sort of carry weight overhaul that we've been planning for a long time. I really can't say which way it'll go. At this point, I would, at least my desire to implement that very strongly eclipses how, what I feel like it would take. Just because it's such a weird, like, I don't know, and it's such an important thing to be able to just Minecraft style put down your own chests. So I really want to do that. And then the other kind of half of that equation is that at the very least, I'll be introducing localized storage through like inns, right? So you can have an innkeeper sort of look after your goods. You're essentially renting a locker with an innkeeper, which I think is a small touch that will go a long way in sort of helping people kind of immersively store their stuff. Even better in some ways than having to just plop down a chest wherever, because the AI is not really equipped to deal with that at the moment. It obviously doesn't solve the problem holistically, but it's, in keeping with the theme of sort of iterative improvements, I think that's a big one. It's kind of strange that it's not like that. I even, frankly, I've never liked the sort of, well, I wouldn't say I don't like them, but the solutions that we've used previously where you have storage tied to your in room, right? I always found that a little bit wonky and scary because, you could just very easily have your stuff deleted if you didn't grab it out of the chest by the time that, the converted back to being not yours. So I'm pretty excited about that. There's other little things of that sort.
Yeah. I really think that the small improvements go a long way, because Wildlander's already a fantastic game. Just to kind of like chime in on 2 points, and then I know you have to go here shortly, so do you have time for another question, or?
Yeah, sure. I can do, well, give me the question really fast and I'll tell you if I have time for it.
Okay, so maybe we won't have time, because I wanted to cover, or just kind of chime on 2 things. You know, in terms of like performance and how well the game runs and all of that, so my game is actually corrupting. I may or may not have added mods that corrupt the game and then removed them. We're not going to talk about that, but so I made an entire video covering like beating the game up to Alduin and the Dark Brotherhood questline. And I was waiting for the game to finally break, and it still hasn't. I won't spoil whether or not I actually beat Alduin. You know, everyone can see it in a future video, but the game is so, you know, Wildlander is so well done that like me hoping it breaks because it's slowly corrupting has done nothing. Like so many physics and stuff have broken, and I can still jump on and play. So
I'm really glad to hear that. That's something we really, really pride ourselves in. I'm telling you, it's been, again, hopefully it's evident, but stability, polish, kind of over everything, because that's just the target audience that we've always had, or that I've always had in my mind, is people who just like, you know, modders, people who exist in the community already. We have I think, higher threshold for the sort of stuff we're willing to put up with. I've always sort of contended that one of the reasons why people don't get into heavy modded setups, one, it's the installation difficulty, which, you know, there's been huge strides. And 2 is how janky it is when you start combining a bunch of mods and stuff together. And that's another thing where like the other mod packs, I think the users, their target users, don't care so much about that. They're used to dealing with it. But for the people who want like a really sort of polished, stable experience, like that's who we're targeting. I feel like it's a wide audience, and it's the kind of thing where we're willing to prioritize focusing on that, focusing on stability, focusing on bug fixing over adding content, adding new mods. Evidently, because if you look at how many sort of content mods other lists have that are super cool that we'd love to add, but it hasn't been the priority.
I think a non-inspiring but very accurate slogan for your guys' motto should be less can be more. And I truly think that that's accurate with the Wildlander mod pack. You guys do not have nearly as much quote-unquote content as other mod packs, but the content you have feels so consistent and fully fledged out, and continues to be that way. It leaves me excited for every little bit that I get, because it goes such a long way. I'm so excited for Religion, not because you're plopping a mod in, but because it's going to have so many different effects, be consistent. I can just play and unplug mentally while I connect into the game.
Oh no.
So
hold on, to interrupt SK, my headphones just died and I gotta plug in. Hold on, give me 2 seconds.
No worries.
Oh gosh. Okay, test 1, 2. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah. I actually could hear you the whole time.
Hold up.
Oh.
Does Discord need to be... Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry about this. Give me 2 seconds.
No worries.
Oh no. What output?
So funny enough for you guys, while he fixes that, I had a similar issue where my headphones didn't work. We had to redo it too, so evens out.
That one I cannot blame my computer at all. My thing screamed at me halfway through to charge my headphones, and oops,
It'd be like that sometimes.
Sure, I really do.
Assuming you have time for it, my last question for you would be, how do you handle misguided negative feedback other than sending Lizzie at them, which is probably the best offense and defense?
Honestly, I can answer that one really fast. I got about 5 minutes here. It doesn't take very long to answer, I think. For one, shout out to Lizzie and just the rest of the team, because frankly, they sort of run interference a lot of the time, and they'll insulate me. When I get a ping or step into the ring. If we're talking really, it's like not even feedback, it's just abuse. Those are the areas where I, kind of step in and bring the hammer down. If we're talking, sorry, you say like feedback that wasn't productive, or what was the phrasing again?
I said misguided negative feedback. A good example would be, I don't know if you remember, there was a Reddit post saying how the mod pack was practically dead, they were pretty sure, and they quoted the roadmap, and it seemed like their heart was in the right place, but they did not use their eyes to look around properly before opening their mouth. To, like,
that was
talk
an
on
odd
it.
one.
So
you could look at, I definitely replied to that. I remember the post that you're talking about. It was, that one, it was a little bit strange to me in the sense that, like, how do I put this? Personally, I think that there's always a nicer way that you could say just about anything. And I generally am of the belief that you can tell, and I don't know this, I don't know who this person is, this is pure speculation, but sometimes I think you can tell when someone is kind of trying to phrase things in a way that maybe isn't as nice or as kind as they could. I've been doing it for long enough where that stuff just happens. There's really, I think the worst thing that you can do is engage it, like, I guess argue with them or get into some sort of flame war. Anytime I've ever felt compelled to, like, angrily reply to something, right? It's because, I was personalizing what someone was saying in some way, or I felt like, they had a point and I was upset about that or whatever. I think pragmatically, the first step is to, make sure if you're going to reply at all, that you are calm, that you've taken whatever time you need to sort of step back and really process, like, what is it that a person's saying? Is someone being an asshole, but they actually are providing valuable feedback in some sense? Then you do what you can to not respond to the asshole part and take what the feedback is and note it wherever you have to note it. You don't even have to, like, reply necessarily and be like, I try to do this when I can, just be like, hey, thanks for the feedback, or, like, it'll be short. With something like that, where it's like, okay, there's some risk of, like, misinformation getting out with a post of a certain kind or a post of a certain size. For those, and really it's, I would say that's secondary. There is a stronger part of me that's just like, nah, that's not how it is, and, like, I'm gonna say so. But, I don't have a whole lot of time to spend on that kind of thing too. That's like a helpful natural barrier. So just, if you're gonna reply, don't be a dick. That's, like, my number one rule. If I'm making, and honestly, I try to apply this to, like, just any sort of comment that I leave anywhere. If I'm writing something down that, assumes that I know something I don't, can't put that in there. If I'm being insulting, can't put that in there. Basically, if I'm just not sort of, I don't know, responding professionally, or just not responding, like, I feel like you have to respond in a way that sort of sucks the energy out of the fire versus, like, adds to it. You know what I mean?
Okay.
That can, it's, you either, you acknowledge what they're saying, or you don't have, oftentimes the best thing to do to say is nothing. Very few things actually require a reply, I think. But yeah, whatever you're going to do, if you're going to reply, I do think it should be a de-escalation if someone's upset. People get upset, right? And they say all kinds of crazy stuff. Most of the time, if someone's, like, just upset and they're foaming at the mouth and they're whatever, you shouldn't reply. It's that person's looking for a fight. Again, they might even be right or whatever. If someone, and that's like the replies that you need to offer the least are to the feedback that has the least value, right? And I mean, like, for real, not feedback that you don't want to believe has value because it hits a nerve or something. But I mean the real stuff where someone's just being a straight asshole. They're trying to get a rise out of you. They're saying something really mean. You don't need to reply to that stuff at all. You can, if you want, you can delete or block, if we're talking a YouTube comment or whatever. But that stuff's junk. I would say the other like useful thing, honestly, at least for me, is that like, and this is not an option that's available to everyone, I know, but like this is something I did a long time ago. My name on Reddit is my name, right? Like my username. On all the platforms I exist on, I am not anonymous. It's like my name is on every single comment that I leave on anything, whether it's in the Wildlander subreddit or elsewise. I think that helps in a way. It helps sort of give you that it helps you to take that step back and really go, okay, do I need to reply to this at all? If I am going to reply to it, what does it look like? Because people, they can see what you reply, and you kind of, you are your own personal brand. You're only as good as your word. And just in a cosmic sense, again, like you want to answer, if you're going to answer at all, like answer in a way that is fair. You're not hyperbolizing. You're not lying about what you know or don't. You're not, using faulty reasoning to try and assert some point that you want to be true, or you're not trying to sort of, I don't know, like make them look bad or something. Just like take the high road, I guess.
If they weren't being an asshole, how would you want to respond, kind of thing?
If they were?
No, like I think to me it sounds like your mindset is pretending they weren't being an asshole. How would you want to respond instead of I'm going to try and out asshole them or try and
let me bring up, what was that post? Let me see if I can find it, because I can't remember what I said, but it'll be, I can grade it. I can do a post hoc Wildlander.
I thought it was well worded.
Oh, my reply to it?
Yes, not
frankly,
his reply,
it's like,
but yours, yeah.
Oh, gotcha. There's been maybe a better way. I'll just go to my profile. I'll look it up real fast. Yeah, okay, here it is. I said, the title, Wildlander, Abandoned? Okay, yeah, so it's like it talks about the roadmap. It says, this is what Ultimate Skyrim was sacrificed for. Someone correct me if my disgust is misguided. So that's a pretty intense reply. It's interesting, right? Because I guess it implies that, well, if you liked Ultimate Skyrim. Now, so I replied to that part specifically, and I said, the reply in general was like, hey, the project's still very much in development. I had slowed for a while to pursue sort of, this alternative stuff that I had to. I talked a little bit. Honestly, I'm looking at my reply here. It's fine. It's even this, I don't know I said anything that needed to be said or wasn't sort of obvious. Excepting this part at the end where they were like, does the roadmap contain art from the D&D Wizards of the Coast? Like, do they know about this? That was like, is this dude being like, I'm going to tell Wizards of the Coast that the roadmap uses their art? That one I feel like you should maybe leave a reply to and be like, okay, just so you know, like any of this art can be used under their content usage guidelines, just so people know that, or even then, I don't know, let them report it and then spend their own time. But I said, I would say that when I quoted the part where they said, someone correct me if my disgust is misguided, that definitely hurt my feelings. We worry about sort of producing a good thing, producing it on a timely rate, whatever. But I understand people get frustrated. I said here, I'd say any amount of disgust levied at a free project you don't contribute to could be misguided, but you may disagree. Frankly, I'm looking at this now. That's still not taking energy. That's adding energy back into it. That's snarky. It's not, I'm not being insulting. I'm not going personal. I'm not doing anything. I'm kind of implying that it's we'll say nonsensical standpoint, or it's like, and I do believe this, that it's like, if you're gonna be like, I could never imagine kicking down the door of someone who's doing really, I don't, paid project or otherwise, but especially a free project, and being like, it's disgusting that, you've spent your time on X versus Y or whatever. I think that's a absolutely ridiculous standpoint. But whatever, you know what I mean? Like, I think to anyone who you would really sort of value their opinion, that would be obvious already. I don't think that I really gained anything here by being like, I'd say any amount of disgust you aim at a free project you don't contribute to is probably misguided. But I didn't say probably, I said is misguided or could be misguided. It's like, whatever, dude. Like, this is not a horrible reply, but I would rate this one. As far as my replies go, this is a C at best, maybe C minus.
Okay.
C plus because that snark was a little bit funny. But it's like, why bother? You know what I mean? Like, how long did it take me? This took at least, I promise you, like 5 minutes to reply. It's a pretty sizable one. I could have spent that 5 minutes doing any other thing. Like, it's okay, but it's not great. So in this particular example, I would say, try to follow advice that I don't feel like I perfectly followed here. And that's another part too, is like, I guess sometimes you just can't help it. Sometimes it gets underneath your skin, and I can tell you, you're a creator, you know this. I think anyone who's ever tried to make anything at all knows that, like, sometimes people say something that just really hits like a part of you that it was like, God, fuck, like that's something that I've worried about. And oh man, like here's someone who seems to, confirm whatever my fears are. It's standard sort of anxious catastrophizing. Most of the time, things are not as bad as we're afraid that they are. Even if they are as bad, it's almost never as bad as we think it's going to be. And yeah, in worst case scenario, like, I don't know, maybe you can learn something from it, but like, you don't have to take on like that. If someone's being a dick, like what we say about others, we say about ourselves. If we're being mean to somebody, it's not because of them, it's because of some stuff that we're going through. So hard as it is to do, it's like, you just try your best to sort of not take it on. Don't waste your time on it. If there's something pragmatic you got to reply to, like that part, even the part's like, I'm going to report you to Wizards of the Coast. We're entirely within the guidelines that they provide, right? So even that, you don't need to say. I don't know. Maybe it helps to some degree to be like, just so anyone else here who's reading this knows, we're good. Like, we abide by all rules and whatever. So sometimes that can, and maybe sometimes it's helpful to sort of take an authoritative stance for the rest of the community, like in a sense, but I don't know. There's a version of this comment that I left that has the stuff that is arguably worth leaving there, and then doesn't have the stuff that's just kind of like, fuck you, you're mean.
That should have been the whole response. Just
yeah, sometimes, man. Sometimes just go for broke. If you're gonna do it, you might as well go wholesale, right? That's also not good advice. Don't do that.
I think, and again, I know you do got to run, so I'll wrap up my overly analytical side as well. But I think something that you have and the team has going for you is, like, I'm looking through the comments, and literally everyone kind of has something to say about his response. So that tells me two things.
That's probably true too. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, no, it tells me two things. One, that there was a lot about his post that left a sour taste in other people's mouth. Dare we say, disgusted us. But beyond that, that also tells me that you guys have done such a good job that the people around you are either simps, which I don't think is the case, or B, I think this is the more likely case, the people around you have enough faith and appreciation for all the work you've done that they're willing to kind of come to your aid, so to speak, and provide some clarity.
I think you're right on the money. I'm reading through the other comments that are here. It's extremely sweet. I think I'm a firm believer that, I do think that communities tend to sort of take the shape of the people who build them and maintain them, right? It's why I try really hard to not be a dick or to be like professional, or, even if someone's upset but passionate and they're upset about the experience, but they're not insulting anyone personally or whatever, like if someone comes in and is like, it's ridiculous that I can't do this, or that this is how this is, and just makes me not want to play anymore. That is a kind of person where if I responded, I'd be like, thank you so much for the feedback, totally understand, or like, here's kind of our thoughts on it, like whatever. Those ones are easier because it's like, I understand people getting frustrated with the experience. There is a line being crossed, I think, when someone's like denigrating the work or the person or whatever.
And half threatening you over the Wizards of the Coast stuff.
Half threatened, like this little subtweet. It's like, what the hell is this? That was like legitimately funny, going back and looking at this. But I think you're right. It's like, you go through and you see all these comments, it just goes to show you that like anything that you were going to say, probably someone else is going to say already. And what more are you, it's like it comes down to maybe sort of valuing even your own time, or just sort of, it's what's the old expression where like you can get 10 lovely comments and then the one negative one you get sticks with you. I think that's true. I think it's also something that, like, you know, hopefully we can sort of find it within ourselves to step by step pay more attention to the people who get it, the people who love you, who like what you're doing. That doesn't mean ignore, you know, valid feedback that doesn't exactly paint your work in the light that you'd hope. But like, if any, I mean, the annoying true Zen reality is that every thing that gets pointed out to us, every form of criticism, or point of criticism that gets pointed out to us that we didn't realize before that we agree with, is an opportunity to then kind of hone your stuff further. And there's definitely a victory in that. And doubly so if someone's not being an asshole about it. But yeah, like if they're being an asshole, you take what's valuable, you try to leave the rest on the table. You really try not to occupy too much of your time with like investing energy into those people, and if you can, like, focus on the people who do get it, again, while, you know, still taking valid feedback here and there. But just there's like I have to run right now. This is like a story, this is like maybe like a weird way to kind of round it out, that my wife told me a little while back. She was listening to this podcast about the former CEO of Pepsi. Her name's Indra Nooyi. You might know her already.
I think I've heard of her, yeah.
She's pretty famous. I didn't know, maybe I'd heard the name, I don't know. But she was CEO of Pepsi for 10 years. We're talking like mid-2000s all the way up through the 2010s. She was pretty kind of resoundingly regarded as a very successful CEO. I'm a Coke fan, just throwing that out there so you can, you know,
that's the right
bias
answer
here, right? Yeah, I mean, of course it is, right? But it actually ties in, like, I guess close to when she started, like she was receiving a lot of pressure from the board to kind of, you know, capture the market sector for Coca-Cola versus Pepsi, like these two products, back from Coca-Cola. And they were like, you know, Coca-Cola has 80% of the market share with this. Like, how is this acceptable? Blah, blah, blah. And she said that PepsiCo's line of products that they have is so sort of vast, right? It encapsulates all these different brands and products, like iced tea and like juice and like some snacks and like whatever. All areas in which she felt she felt like the work that you would put into sort of having these different products kind of establish a larger share of the market, like all that effort would have been so much better spent, because you weren't running up against what is essentially resistance that's pointed right at you, right? Like, it's very hard to get anything productive out of a situation in which it's you butting heads with someone else or something else that is, you know, like it's focused right on you. It's already, maybe in this case, got a sort of the higher ground, Anakin. The amount of effort that it's going to require you to try and make inroads in this direction, this particular direction, is just outsized. It's massive compared to what you might be able to accomplish if you sort of regard the problem differently, if you kind of try your very best to take the blinders off and look at what other options are available to you, what other opportunities you might have that you're not looking at to sort of get to where you want to go, even if getting there doesn't quite look like what you thought it might, right? Like, this is so difficult to do when we're emotionally invested and when we have a very close association between our identity and our work. It can feel so difficult, you know, going back to the analogy, it can feel so difficult to get a mean comment. And the worst ones, of course, right, are the ones where you know that they have like a valid criticism, like nestled in there. You're like, fuck. But like, I don't know. If you're
they were so ugly about it, you don't want to accept it.
Right, and so you argue with them, or you like, I don't know, it's like there's no one size fits all solution. But let's say that like like maybe, you know, in a weird bizarro universe, you are like, I'm gonna show them, and like I'm gonna fix this thing that is like unfixable, and that's why we didn't fix it before. But you know what? I'm gonna spend all this time and effort on like fixing it. And so, you know, best case scenario, you fixed it and it took a really long time, but you didn't stop to maybe look at whether that would be a big deal or not. Or you just, you know, it turns out that you fixed what they were talking about and that didn't solve the fundamental problem that you might have seen if you sort of took a step back. Or you weren't able to fix it at all, and so now you just wasted all this time and effort, whatever. It's just like, I don't know. There's a lot of different options available that are hard to see when you're just laser focused on someone who's being an asshole. You know what I mean? So it's like, if you can kind of step out of it, value your own time, again, take what's useful, and then focus on, like in that analogy, the people who, you know, the other sort of avenues are the people who get it, right? It's like, instead of focusing really hard on trying to please someone who's already being a jerk, that time I think is better spent to be like, okay, the people who get it, the people who are here for you, the people who support you and who understand what you're putting in, like, focus on them instead. Maybe it's kind of like focusing on yourself. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's a long-winded analogy. Now I've set myself way over my time limit, but it's worth it.
No, I think
it's a cool story.
It is a cool story, and because that's something I've started.
She was right, by the way.
With.
She made. They had like record prop. Like the PepsiCo did incredibly well underneath this lady. Like she fucking nailed it, and they basically dominated every one of these market sectors that she was talking about. FYI, so.
Which is pretty crazy because Coke tastes better than Pepsi. So
it does.
Props to them.
I mean, it's like there was no arguing. It's like Coke wins. You know what I mean? In my opinion, but in the opinion of 80% of the market, right? So why fight on that turf?
Yeah, take it to a turf where you have a chance. No, that's right. A really good idea, and I think that was a perfect analogy. I appreciate you touching on that for a little while because that's something I've had to deal with a little bit more now. So I'm like,
sure, man.
You know, what do people who are more veterans in this realm, you know, have for advice? Obviously, I've kept you longer than anticipated. I do appreciate you.
On me, as always.
I do appreciate you hopping on and doing an interview. I have a blast with these every time. Before we wrap up, was there anything else you wanted to add?
Nope. I think I've added just about enough.
Awesome. Well, you have a great rest of your day, Dylan.
You too, SK. We'll do it again sometime.
For sure. Stay safe, Wildlanders.